It was a huge win for Ted Cruz in Wisconsin last night. Fox News exit polls show Cruz commanding support in just about every single voter category, including old, young voters, male, female voters, and, well, very conservative and evangelical Christians. So is he right at that turning point of the GOP race? Joining me now, Morgan Ortagus, Mark Serrano, Ron Nehring, and Mercedes Schlapp. Well, Ron, let me go to you. You are a national spokesman for the Ted Cruz campaign. Big win for you guys last night, larger than the polls had suggested. What do you attribute that to? Was it more about the establishment, the money and everything else in Wisconsin against Trump, or was this some sort of real true vote, grassroots vote for Ted Cruz?
Well, I think that's a great question, and it's important for us to understand the lessons of Wisconsin in order to apply them going forward in order to win the Republican nomination. I think what you saw was a consolidation of the traditional conservative Republican base behind Senator Cruz. Nobody in the country was paying more attention to this race over the course of the last 2 weeks than the people of Wisconsin. They saw every single thing that all the candidates did. All three candidates tried to win: Donald Trump, Ted Cruz, John Kasich, even though John Kasich left the state early, which is, unfortunate for him. But at the end of the day, everybody tried to win the support there, and at the end of the day, Senator Cruz won, and it was a both wide and deep victory, and it was a rejection of Donald Trump at the same time. I mean, people saw the things that Donald Trump was doing, both the crazy things he was saying in terms of policy and, withdrawing from NATO, or however he chose to spin it, taking 4 different positions on abortion on the same day, or his attacks against Heidi Cruz. People saw the candidates, they embraced Senator Cruz, they rejected Donald Trump. That's why this is such an important inflection point for the campaign.
Well, here's the thing, Morgan. Going all the way back to the mid-'70s, the GOP candidate that's won Wisconsin has gone on to win a nomination. Not always the general election, but the nomination. Is it too little, though, too late for Ted Cruz? Despite all the things that Ron brought up, those feel like things are issues that could probably fade away, or that Donald Trump could certainly sort of make amends with.
Well, this year is not like any other year. Right. That's been proven to us already. And so I think, one of the interesting things for me last night is one of the big winners, of course, Ted Cruz was a very big winner. So was Scott Walker in my book. This is a guy that's had to battle re-elections, that have had to battle so much in that state, people trying to vote him out in the referendum.
So
and he really brought his infrastructure to the, and I have to say, he's sitting really pretty with the Republican establishment.
Right. So in other words, are you hinting that maybe this could be that fresh-faced wild card that Karl Rove hinted at last week?
No, because I just don't see how that can happen in the rules. The only way that Rule 40B can be changed, which says that you have to win 8 states, is the delegates have to change it. Who are the delegates? Trump and Cruz delegates. So I don't see any incentive for these delegates to change the rules for someone other than the two of them to be the nominee. I think Kasich is, he's a little misguided.
Well, Kasich may be, but again, I think what a lot of people are concerned about, Ron, it's not necessarily even Kasich, but again, a Scott Walker or Paul Ryan, someone like that coming off the bench to the so-called rescue. I do want to ask, though, and I do want to welcome in the other 2 guests. Let me go to you, Mark. I know in the past you've kind of blown off or kind of dismissed anytime your candidate, Donald Trump, is lost, but did you see anything in this particular outcome that should be a yellow or red flag for the Trump campaign?
Oh, very much so, Charles. Look, if you take a look at the history of this campaign, Iowa was a very tough loss for Donald Trump, and he really reconfigured his campaign or his strategy at that point. I think this is very similar. I think this is going to be a very similar week where they take a big step back and they figured out what went wrong. And I think they can, obviously they've got a very different territory. Wisconsin is a very different state. I don't believe it's a harbinger, certainly not through April, because there are a lot of delegates, 267 that are up on April 26th, and it's not really Ted Cruz's territory. So, nothing really changes. We've got 226 delegate lead for Trump. Cruz had a great win, and he was very shrewd about it. But, I believe that at the end of April, Trump is still going to see a 300, 350 delegate lead.
Although you didn't say the magic 1237.
Well, good point, but that's going to be decided late on June 7th in California.
All right, to that point, Mercedes, Mark is just admitting that Ted Cruz pretty shrewd with respect to the ground game. Could that be enough to keep him in the game, so to speak, until they get perhaps to this convention that everyone's worried about?
Oh, absolutely. I think what's been fascinating about Ted Cruz's campaign is not only the solid organization behind it, but the fact that they're playing this delegate game very well. Obviously, they've gotten 18 of those delegates in North Dakota. They just got 6 delegates in Colorado. They are nipping away and getting these delegates by really not only having a strong ground game, but also in what I would call sort of the shadow delegate campaign. I mean, courting those delegates are an incredibly important part, especially if you do not get to that magical number of 1,237, because you end up in a contested convention, and every delegate counts at that point. And the delegates, Charles, they have a lot of power going into this convention.
You know, Ron, I do want to ask, Donald Trump released a statement last night suggesting that Ted Cruz had talked with the super PACs, which would be a violation of federal laws, also saying Ted Cruz is a Trojan horse being used by the establishment. How does the Cruz campaign push back against that?
Well, you know, Donald Trump says lots of crazy things, particularly right after he loses elections, which seems to be increasingly the case. You know,
but you guys do understand, Ron, that the establishment does not like Ted Cruz, and to a certain degree, maybe he's trying to play them and then trying to play him. But there's something disingenuous about the newfound relationship between the two.
Well, a couple things. One is that, you know, Donald Trump, as he tries to explain his, you know, devastating defeat last night, all of a sudden says, oh, no, Ted Cruz is the establishment candidate or something like that. You know, so there's all of this kind of back and forth, which we see. The truth is that we've had 4 straight victories in a row. We've picked up about 100 delegates as we've gone forward with these last 4 contests. Donald Trump predicted that he would have this big victory last night, that it was going to surprise people. There was a surprise, all right. It was in the form of a 13-point, you know, win for Senator Cruz. So, of course, Donald Trump is going to say all types of crazy, wacky things, and nobody really pays attention to that anymore.
Well, but you do deny then that Cruz is in touch with any of these super PACs. You deny that.
Oh, give me a break. You know, we abide by the rules. Okay. And if Donald Trump doesn't like the rules, he should talk to his general counsel, who was the head of the Federal Election Commission when those rules were created.
All right, guys, let's leave it there again.